Hey everybody, it's me, Andrew Markowitz again. Um, so there was no video on like 2 days ago, and there was no video yesterday for a couple of reasons. One, I worked a really late shift that night, and then two, yesterday was actually my day off after 6 days straight, and I just wanted to relax and read, and then also talk and hang out with some buddies and just not doing anything like deeply thinking or anything that might just upset me. I just needed to take a day to like breathe after a long 6 days straight. um so that aside, let's get into this video. So this video is called from Huntley Clips, and then it's also from Wes Huff. I really like this guy. I like a lot of what he has to say on stuff. And it's also about deconstructing. I want to propose a question at the start of this video to get people thinking and maybe posting in the comment sections about some things. And that is mostly this. As far as I'm aware, well, I'm actually just going to phrase it this way. What on this planet breaks down and doesn't get repurposed? What in this universe actually doesn't do that? I'll give you my answer probably at the end of this. But I think that's a good question to ask, and ask yourself, because if you come to the conclusion that I've come to, you'll see why this should be a step and not a completion.
Talking about what I think are probably the legitimate issues with a lot of people who go through the quote-unquote deconstruction. I'm not sure that they were given the proper nutrients and foundation and soil quality to be able to grow roots that actually gave them subsistence, so that when those things did happen, it was somewhat too late already. And so I
Agreed.
think, what I would want to encourage people is that the point of deconstruction is reconstruction, because if you deconstruct.
Bingo! Awesome. You said it right in the first part of the video. So the answer there is the big hint there was, yeah, nothing on this earth deconstructs and stays broken down. A body dies and decays and becomes nutrients and fuel for the soil to grow plants, and those plants, etc., etc., etc. Like I could do that with anything. Even something as awful as radiation is just breaking down the material till it comes back to a neutral state where it can then sit back into the world to be used again for something else. Like nothing is purposeless. Nothing is without purpose. And that's a really important thing to think about and figure out and understand. Is nothing is without purpose. Um, Everything gets rebuilt. Everything gets fixed. Um, like you don't just, when you're like have a broken light bulb or anything out like that, you don't just take out the light bulb and not put in a new one. You do a lot more than that. So, like, this idea of just deconstructing from your faith is, I'm just gonna say, it's really dumb. You don't just deconstruct. You should be breaking everything down to figure out what's at your foundations. That way you can build upon it and build something strong.
Something and you don't reconstruct it, it's just demolition, right?
Exactly.
And so your worldview perspective shouldn't be a movement of demolition.
Agreed.
Doubt is not a problem, but it's not the destination. So if we
Facts.
see doubt as the destination and we get fixated with that,
Yeah.
we're not actually getting to the answers that we should be pursuing in a lot of those things. And unfortunately, I think that's what I see a lot, is that people are kind of taking doubt and they're putting it in the place of the final place where the answer should come from.
Yeah, people do this a lot. I fully agree with Wester. This is the biggest mistake that a lot of people do when they deconstruct, as he says, from the faith. Is there's like, you're not finished with the process and you're just leaving it as a broken husk. Like, that's dumb.
And they're pushing into their questions, but without actually trying to seek answers. And in that sense, a lot of people become cynics rather than skeptics.
Yep.
Because I'm, to some degree, I'm a skeptic. I will reserve judgment on a particular topic until I feel like I have sufficient answers for any said topic. But a cynic, I think, is doing
I'm
so
working towards
because
that.
the questions are the
I can't
end
put
point
myself
for
as
them.
a skeptic.
And I think that's where we should be honest and self-reflective and say, you know, maybe there are actually answers that provide sufficient groundwork to actually reconstruct the deconstruction that
Yes.
we've been putting ourselves through. I think we're in a unique point in time where people are open to certain things, and maybe they're in some regards disenfranchised with
Sorry if you guys heard that. That was my mouse finished charging.
a superficial religiosity that they may have experienced. If they did grow up in the church, say, you know, in my instance, in the early 2000s, there was a lot of just kind of superficiality, seeker sensitivity.
I will fully agree to that. It was a lot of churches were like super surface level. And it definitely blew up in the church's face.
That I think had the right motivation but the wrong method by which to go about that, in that they genuinely saw that they wanted to get people through the doors of the church, which is a good goal to have.
Yes.
But in doing so, what they were trying to win them with is what they won them to. And so because it was very
that's the
superficial,
problem.
it was very kind of on the surface, it didn't have any substantial depth.
This is what I keep talking about when I talk to people, and I keep saying those words basically every video of the key thing to look at and understand and realize is that we need to stop looking at the surface of the pond and we need to dig in the depths of the ocean. That's where the problems lie, that's where your answers lie, that's where everything goes down to. And we're not doing that as a society right now. And it's biting us in the ass.
Winds and the rains of trial and suffering, hurt did eventually come. There was no root system to be able to ground them. You know, you're talking about, you know, that having that foundation before. When my parents lived in Ontario, we moved our family across to British Columbia for a couple of years. And when we did move, my dad, my grandfather, and I drove our van and a U-Haul trailer across the country. And I remember very vividly in Saskatchewan driving across like the very flat fields, right? Watching a dog run away for a week. And seeing this giant tree in the middle of the field that just kind of stood out. And it was always this picture of, for me, you know, how did that tree survive? And the answer was, it had a root system that probably was both grounding it and pulling in the nutrients that were required for its particular growth in that.
This is something else that you have to do when you're examining a faith and when you're examining someone bringing you a different gospel, someone bringing you something else and making claims and those kind of things, is when Jesus Christ talks about you will know them by their fruits. You have to think, okay, this is a good tasting fruit. This fruit looks good. All of these qualities look like a good fruit and produce a good fruit. But did this actually come from a good tree, or did it just come from a good orchard? what was the tree that this came from, and is this just a fruit that is an oddball among many from this tree? So you have to look at the tree. Is the tree a good, strong tree? Does it have good roots? Does it have a good foundation? Is its soil good? If any of those are a no, those are red flags that you have to plan up and go, I don't know about this fruit. You don't just eat the fruit, because some really good tasting fruits are poisonous because they come from a bad tree.
Point in time. But it's too late for the tree to try to grow the roots in the midst of the storm.
Is there one manuscript, ancient manuscript, that you've held that has completely impacted you, changed your heart, your faith? And how old was it, and which one was it?
I don't think there's one that's necessarily kind of affected me strongly. Every time I get the opportunity to be able to hold in my hand or view something that goes, say, back to the 2nd or 3rd century.
That'd be awesome.
What it does for me is it encapsulates the fact that I can, to some degree, standing in front of, say, a 2nd century fragment of the Gospel of John, which I've done. What I feel in that moment is, who was the person 2,000 years ago, almost 2,000 years, who was likewise standing in front of this piece of written material and putting the ink on the page. It's this kind of looking down the timeline of history and including myself in it to some degree, within the family tree.
It's like looking... How would I describe it? When you're reading these texts and you're reading this kind of stuff, which obviously I've never done it to the level that Wes has. Like, Wes has had the actual privilege of, having those 2nd century documents in his hand. Whereas I've only really started digging and maybe had a printed copy of a Concordia in my hands. But you just, from the language and everything else that's spoken to, it really is looking down the lens of history. I don't know how else to describe it, like a telescope that you're just looking through and seeing through the ages. It's awesome. It's so awesome.
There's no way to know whether the scribe was a Christian or not, but even hypothetically, just kind of putting the idea in that maybe this was a late 2nd century Christian, and it would have been very costly for them to inscribe, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, onto a piece of material in a time frame when they could have been in a region that was illegal to do so. And so being in the family tree of historical Christianity and finding myself on a branch almost 2,000 years later, tying myself tangibly to that point in time, to that person, I think does something to the nature of the faith that I believe, in that I'm not an island. I'm part of a broader story that God has invited me into and invited so many other people, going back to, calling the patriarchs, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God is a personal God and invites us all into that narrative and story. So it's this unique perspective of looking at an artifact and the artifact tying my own personal faith journey into.
Have you held any manuscripts that are, whether it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, any pieces of those manuscripts written by somebody who directly witnessed the life of Christ that you're like, this is John. John wrote this. I'm holding it.
No. And the fact is, we don't have any documents, written kind of artifacts of papyrus or parchment.
And it's likely that none of those actually survived. And the reason for that is, 1, the persecution, and 2, bro, those were definitely passed around left, right, and center and copied constantly by scribes. Those papers got tore up. Those papers got used up. In the best way possible. They got rewritten and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. Which is a beautiful, awesome, amazing thing, and we should be incredibly happy about that. Because it's why we have artifacts of them to this day.
That would go back that early. The earliest documents that we have of the Bible go back to the 2nd century. But I think what we can say about that is that what we're dealing with, though it be a copy, is a copy that reflects what the original was written about.
Yeah.
And this is also testified to by some of the early Christian writers who themselves were disciples of the disciples. So you have this category of people who we call the apostolic fathers.
Yeah.
And they're called that particularly because they had a direct tie to Peter, to John, to Paul, and can comment on something like, we know who Mark is. He's the traveling companion of Peter. He wrote down that which Peter told him. We have these kind of testimonies. And so if we're going to call it like the dating of how we know that those documents are 1st century, coming in the eyewitness period.
Yep.
It's less to do with the tangible manuscript evidence that we have in saying, this was written by John, because I'm not even sure how you would identify that, even if we did find a 1st century manuscript.
I think it's my wishful thinking.
Yeah. And
it is prayers and wishful
thinking. In a
thinking.
modern sense, we have the capability to tie things back to, but that's true for everything from the ancient world. We have no document that we can call the original autograph of, whether that's Caesar or whether that's Marcus Aurelius.
That's an important thing that's an important thing that Wes is discussing here, is that there is no ancient document throughout human history past the 1800s can be identified, confirmed, and 100% appreciated as the actual autograph of any famous person of history. Any of them. And likely they weren't, because many of them didn't write. Many of them had scribes write for them, because Wes has a great video on it. They believed a completely different thing. They believed a completely different thing from us. Completely different. So that's important to think about.
It is. Any of these ancient writers were all dealing with copies of copies of copies.
Yep.
And that doesn't dilute our ability to know that is what the original authors wrote, but it's this fascinating network of the fact that the early Christians were very tenacious to get the gospel message out. And so the fact that we find copies in Egypt, but then also later on in places like Britain and across Asia and all over Europe and North Africa,
it's
is a
actually
testament
awesome.
to the Christians were very.
I think there's documents of of them in Britain in the 3rd century. As early as the 3rd century, there were like scribes in Britain who had texts of the gospel, which is amazing.
Very eager to get the message of who Jesus was, and that meant that it was spread very far, very fast, very early on, which precluded any one person or group of people controlling the text at any one point in time. So though we don't have a copy that we can say, actually this is Matthew's copy and he wrote this with his own hand, the fact that we have copies of Matthew that are so widely spread throughout the ancient world, and we can compare them, and even if differences pop up in Asia, we know that those differences are geographically located because we don't find them in Europe or in North Africa.
Yep.
And so if someone wanted to, in a kind of Da Vinci Code-esque way, write in a particular doctrine to the Bible, they would have had to have the means of control to find all the copies in all the other places all across the ancient world and alter them.
Yeah.
And that would have been
that is
possible.
Exactly.
Because there are copies.
That's why you can actually attribute that so much of the Bible was held together and so good, is that it spread so far so quickly, and everything on those documents matches up so well and so good with each other that you can discern the areas that had certain errors, that had certain things that are different from each other, and are like, hey, this don't line up with this one. Hey, this don't line up with this one. It's not even contradictions. It's all the time. A lot of the time, it can be something like, well, this one phrased it this way and this one phrased it this way, but they all mean the same thing. So
prepared in the sands of Egypt, they would have had no
That's
idea.
beautiful.
And that's interesting because these stories line up amongst all these copies, these oral traditions that are passed on and written down. The stories about Jesus line up. So you're right. In fact, the more copies there are, the more evidence there is that the stories about him are true and valid.
All right, we're gonna bring.
So that was a pretty good short little video. I think that's what I'm gonna leave for tonight as the video. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. I like that one as just a quick little thinker video of like, hey, as a reminder when it comes to deconstruction, don't just deconstruct. You have to reconstruct after breaking things down. You don't take apart a car to not rebuild the car. You're not scrapping your religion for parts. You're taking it apart to understand it so you can rebuild it better than it was. Okay? With that all said, thank you. Have a good night. God bless. Remember to like, sub, and subscribe. Catch you all later.